Hi, Andrew from Sachs, and welcome to video number 9 in our 9-video sequence on stakeholder engagement. This one's about stakeholder mapping. We're going to show you a really simple technique on stakeholder mapping. You know, when I first wrote my first version of this presentation going back probably about 10 years ago, I did a big search on stakeholder mapping, and one of the things that struck me is just how difficult and complicated it all was. So what I tried to do is to distill from all these different stakeholder mapping techniques a really simple version of stakeholder mapping that would kind of be faithful to the most important components, but people could do it without turning themselves inside out. So one of the things that can be really powerful as a start is to meet to decide your top stakeholders. Now, in the last video in this sequence, we talked about a concept called facilitative leadership, where a leader is facilitating a process rather than being top down or just asking people's opinions. In other words, getting people to do something. So I think that this can be a great way of doing your stakeholder mapping. Get the entire team together and cause them to be all active in it. Now, that will also cause them to be engaged in the processes or decisions that come out of it. You get together and you identify your top stakeholders. So we said theoretically 20. Categorize them according to how important they are to you. Low, medium, and high. Now, you form the decision based on to what degree they can influence the outcomes that you need to achieve. A high important stakeholder is somebody who is really critical to us achieving whatever it is that we need to achieve. A low important stakeholder, yeah, we shouldn't ignore them, but they really don't have that much direct influence. By the way, low important stakeholders in terms of influencing the ultimate outcome can be important because maybe they can influence an influencer. So in your stakeholder universe, sometimes low important stakeholders from a direct impact point of view can be much higher in terms of their social impact, their ability to persuade or influence other stakeholders. Then you consider how close they are to you. Close means that a warm and effective relationship exists. Medium means that the relationship is neither close nor distant. Distant means that the relationship is not close or supportive. And I think that a really pragmatic way of deciding close or distant is if you ask them to do something, would they do it? So for instance, a close stakeholder is if you said to them, look, would you come to a meeting next Tuesday? And they just go, yeah, sure, no problem. If you could talk to somebody, could I ask you to speak to Mary Smith because she's important to this? Yeah, I'll do it. You know, that's a close stakeholder, somebody who will do what you want. And of course, you will do something for them if they ask as well. That's a partnership kind of a relationship. A distant relationship may be somebody who doesn't want to take your calls, if that's distant enough, or maybe you ask them to do things, no, I'm too busy. Clearly, that's a distant relationship. Once you've identified who your stakeholders are and where they fit into the categories, you can map them. And this diagram sets off the elements of closeness and importance. V, which is a low importance stakeholder, T, which is a medium important stakeholder, and W, which is a high importance stakeholder. So clearly W is a really, really important resource, a really important colleague in whatever it is that we're trying to achieve. Now, you'll also see that in terms of medium stakeholders, there's X, who's relatively low importance, S, who's a very important stakeholder. And then if you look on the outer here, which is the distant stakeholders, you have two really important stakeholders, Y and Z. They are of high importance, but quite distant. When you map this, and you can use things like whiteboards to have these available so that everybody can see them. And I've certainly seen that in client sites where, you know, you've got a whiteboard and you've got the circles drawn out and you've got magnets that represent particular stakeholders, then that can cause you at a glance to see what we may need to do next. By the way, a stakeholder is not an organization. A stakeholder is an individual human being. So Mary Smith, who works for this corporation, the corporation isn't the stakeholder. This is a psychological undertaking, and so we're working with human beings rather than organizations. Once we've mapped this out, this can imply action. Let's start with the stakeholders who are high in importance, identify those whose distance is greater than we would like, and brainstorm options to bring them closer. So if you do this in a facilitative leadership sense, where you get together as a group and you identify how to bring these stakeholders closer, that can be a really powerful thing to do, but it can also sponsor a spirit of teamwork and creativity amongst the group. Now, the honest truth is, if a particular individual has been interacting with a stakeholder and hasn't been able to make that work, It may well be that you just have to change the personnel. Maybe this individual leaves that stakeholder and this person comes in to try freshening up the relationship. That can be really powerful. But one of the things that can also be done is that when you're looking at your stakeholder map, this person's close and they know this person who's distant. Can we in some way bring them together to warm things up? Now, if you're going to try to do that, one of the most powerful things that you can do is to use the principle of what in social psychology is sometimes called propinquity, closeness. So closeness is we tend to build relationships with people that we are somehow similar to. So it could be we're both parents, or we both have an interest in this particular thing, or we both play golf, or it could be something that appears to be quite trivial, which can warm up a relationship. Of course, it could be something really crucial, like we're both trying hard to achieve a particular objective, which may not be related to the objective that we're trying to achieve at the present moment, but it can draw us together. We look for points of common interest. Now, I think a really important thing to understand about stakeholder mapping is that you just don't have one stakeholder map necessarily. You might have different stakeholder maps for different projects or different issues, and that's perfectly reasonable. Stakeholder mapping, like any sensible technique, should be something that's flexible and creative and dynamic to be used in the way that we want. We hope that this sequence of videos on stakeholder engagement has been helpful to you. Click on the link near this video if you want to talk to SACS about any of the measurement instruments that we've described in these videos or anything else that you need help with.